Let's be real, most people were probably pretty meh about the idea of Fontaine until the teaser dropped in. Oh mama, what do we have here? The head of the House of Hearth, collector of orphans, cultivator of Snezhnaya's military units, and curator of snazzy suits. That's right, it's the fan favorite Arlecchino herself, and she's about to make a big splash in the Nation of Water, and you know people are excited for it. And shockingly, I haven't talked about her possible presence in Fontaine at all yet, despite having already made 2 whole speculation videos, mostly because I really didn't have anything to say about her that others haven't already said. We just don't know a whole lot. But that all changes today because in this video, we will be discussing some rather obscure references for Arlecchino that I have not seen anyone else talk about yet, and of course, we're going to do a little theorizing about who or what she may be canonically. Timestamps and notes for further reading are in the description box below, and without further delay, let's dive into this obscure look at Arlecchino. Let's start with some very quick canonical background information on Arlecchino because honestly, there really isn't that much, so why not? Arlecchino is either the 4th or 10th harbinger because those are the only 2 seats unaccounted for as of right now, unless you think Piero isn't ranked, in which case the first seat is also open, and her only known responsibility is running the House of Hearth, an orphanage in Snezhnaya which seems to take in orphans from all over Teyvat and raises them to be Fatui operatives. Laini, Lynette, and Fremine are all likely 3 orphans from the House of Hearth given their talk of missions and their close ties to Arlecchino. This will be important for later, so keep it in mind. Both Wanderer and Child call Arlecchino crazy in the insane sort of way, with Child going on to suggest that she's very self-centered and would betray anyone without a second thought if it suited her, even the Tsaritsa. Wanderer also says that she has a tendency to make people disappear, like assassin style. As far as canon goes, that is literally all we know for sure, since the trailer didn't really tell us anything new. However, we did finally get a good look at her outfit that was hidden beneath her Fatui cloak last time, and there is one detail in particular that stood out to me, and literally everyone else. Yep, I'm talking about her hands, because those sure as heck are not gloves. Her hands look like they've been stained with soot, a very fitting feature for the head of the House of Hearth, after all, and you really gotta wonder what could have possibly made them that way. And this is where we start to get really obscure, because during my foray into Fontaine's historical inspirations, my buddy Rogo and I stumbled across something rather interesting that could be one of many sources of Arlecchino's inspiration and could give us some insight into her motivations and possible role in the overall story. I highly suggest that you check out my historical context for Fontaine video if you haven't already, because I really think it helps with understanding kind of like what's going on. But if you don't wanna, then here are some events and dates that may be meaningless to you and that I will grossly oversimplify. Fontaine is based on 19th century France, along with a few other European countries like England and probably Italy. And during this time, Europe had just been through the Napoleonic Wars and was exhausted of its finances, manpower, and materials. No one really wanted to fight anymore, so a tenuous consensus among the European nations formed called the Concert of Europe. Now I say tenuous because it faltered a few times, especially during the French 1848 revolutions and all of the revolutions that began to spark around Europe as a result of that one in particular. This, plus border disputes coupled with industrialization making great progress in the realm of military technology, basically had everyone on edge. But I want to draw your attention to one event in particular, and that was when Austria-Hungary annexed Bosnia during one of these little border disputes, which by itself isn't really that big of an event in the grand scheme of things at the time, but it did really piss off their neighbor Serbia because Serbia wanted Bosnia instead, and there were a ton of Serbian nationalists within Bosnia who also wanted Bosnia to be part of Serbia. Which brings us to June of 1914. I promise there is a point to all of this. So, June 1914, the heir to the Austria-Hungarian throne, Franz Ferdinand, made a trip to annex Bosnia, and that pissed off the nationalists there. Now, 3 members from the youth group known as Young Bosnia tried and failed to assassinate him with a bomb. 2 of them were captured, and for safety's sake, Ferdinand's motor carriage decided to change their route, but they never told the driver, so the 3rd assassin, Gavrilo Princip, was still nearby when they got back in the car. And so Princip successfully assassinated Ferdinand, and that shot was the shot heard round the world. Many historians attribute the start of World War I to this very specific event, and while on the surface these seem to have nothing to do with Arlecchino, this is the obscure thing. Young Bosnia was a youth group associated with the Serbian military secret society known at the time as Unification or Death, who commonly worked with youth groups for similar operations. But Unification or Death has another name. the Black Hand. And this is where it gets really interesting, because Arlecchino having black hands and leading 3 young agents into an undercover mission into Fontaine, and she's known for basically assassinating people, and the timeline matches up. Like, what kind of coincidence is that? It's not one. That's what type of coincidence it is. It just isn't one. Plus, all of this was during the Concert of Europe, which I know isn't like a literal thing, but the way she talks about being actors on a stage feels like a nod to this somehow. And if you really sit down to think about it, all of the nations within Teyvat so far seem to align with most of the major players in World War I. But I do feel like I need to be very, very clear about something here, because we can get into some very dodgy territory really quickly. In Teyvat, there will be no World War II. I know using this time period as a source of inspiration for a game that pulls a lot of direct references from history can tread some really, really sketchy waters, but I really don't think the game will go in that direction. Because see, remember, Conria has already been destroyed, so Germany is kind of yeeted out of this picture, and even though there are survivors, all of them seem to agree that their enemy is Celestia more than anything else. Plus, Conria's destruction seems to be what triggered Snezhnaya to also want to challenge Celestia, and so far, the Archons aren't exactly trying very hard to stop them, meaning they may agree with the goal but not the methods. Therefore, I think it's really unlikely that the nations will end up fighting each other and are far more likely to join together and take on Celestia instead. In fact, I kind of feel like Arlecchino can be used as a proof point for this. Hear me out. Many people have suggested that Columbina is likely a Seelie, mostly because she likes to sing like an angel, which seems to be what Seelies are based off of, and the 6 wings in her hair kind of remind folks of seraphim, who were known to sing holy, holy, holy around the throne of God while keeping their eyes completely covered. And yes, they did in fact have 6 wings, 3 sets. Now, in the Commedia dell'arte, Arlecchino and Columbina are usually lovers, or at least co-conspirators, with Arlecchino usually working to thwart the plans of their master, and overall just serving as a polar opposite to Piero. It's very easy to miss in the teaser because it's only on screen for like a split second, but Arlecchino has at least 2 crossed wings in her hair in a very similar style to Columbina. Now, each one is a different color, and that kind of matches her hair. Her eyes also have these crosses in them and a very similar pattern to the white lattice across Columbina's closed eyes, and since the 2 are lovers in the Commedia, you have to wonder if these 2 aren't connected in a bit more direct way to each other than the other harbingers are. Like, consider this possibility, that they might both be Seelies. See, Columbina is described as unsettling to the point where even Child doesn't want to fight her, and Wanderer warns the Traveler against it as well, and that kind of lines up with Arlecchino also being a bit unhinged and not to be trifled with. And I know everyone's been wondering about this really weird brooch on her chest. It kind of looks like it's been made up of 4 wings, and cherubim were known for having 2 sets of wings for a total of 4. And if that's all true, then Arlecchino must be, in my opinion, most likely ranked number 4, since Columbina is ranked number 3, and cherubim are usually of a lower choir than the seraphim, and that makes her quite a frightening opponent indeed. But I do wonder who would be considered her master then. Is she rebelling against God or the primordial one after possibly being cast aside like the goddess of flowers was? Or is she a double agent infiltrating the Fatui with plans to screw over Piero in the end? My money's actually on the former, but possibly both, because the idea that she may be using Lainey, Lynette, and Fremene to trigger an event that would paint Celestia as an indisputable enemy of Teyvat, uniting otherwise disparate nations in an all-out war against heaven feels very likely, all things considered. And it would be hilarious if that is true, given her 2 best options in the Fatui constellation wheel. Her most likely constellation is that of the clawed hand with the flame, which is probably a hand of glory. If you don't know what that is, it's the severed hand of a traitor or a criminal that's been turned into a candle talisman thing with the supernatural ability to paralyze people. So a symbol of a traitor given to someone who actively betrays their master? Seems like a pretty good fit for Arlecchino. Alternatively, if you're a believer in Piero not being ranked as a harbinger, then the Crying Mask is also a decent candidate, as it is most likely the Melpomene Mask, which, when coupled with the Laughing Mask, is a sock and buskin symbol of the theater, another very strong theme in Arlecchino's handbasket. I can kind of make a case for the crossed nails too, seeing how the Black Hand Society used a special ritual cross wherein Jesus is held in place by 3 nails, but I won't. The argument isn't that compelling, but it exists. Of course, the real question on everyone's mind is, will she be playable? I don't know, maybe. I can make a case for both sides, really, but we'll just have to wait and see. Well, that was a bit of a short video for me, so let me leave you with some speculations about Cendrone while the names of my adorable little channel members roll by. Now, during last year's Lantern Rite, we got to see what Guizhong looked like, and I was kinda surprised to see her have so many visual similarities to Cendrone and a shared love of Conrian robotics, that I absolutely had to theorize that Cendrone was a revived but also partly mechanized version of Guizhong. And I also made the case for Cendrone to be the creator of all the Catherines of the Adventurers Guild, since they all dress similarly and the Catherines are all also mechanical puppets of Snezhnaya. But now I have a new crack theory. Heavy emphasis on the crack, please. Prior to its adoption into the Commedia dell'arte, Cendrone was a marionette from a puppet show where all the puppets were played by a single puppeteer. And that made me wonder, what if instead of Cendrone being the girl here and being Guizhong, it's actually the robot that is Cendrone, the robot that was taken in by Guizhong, who tinkered with it a bunch, ultimately allowing it to gain a type of sentience over time while also growing fond of its little dust god. And then, when she died, the robot was so distraught, it began constructing new robots, new mechanical puppets, in an effort to remake her, kind of like Karkata. Then later on, it would have gotten picked up by the Fatui, and it would carry around its most precious creation, being the little talking puppet in the perfect likeness of Guizhong. And that means it wouldn't speak for itself, because after all, it's the puppeteer, and she's its marionette. She's the one who's supposed to be on stage, and it's the one that's supposed to be behind the scenes, pulling the strings of every Catherine in Teyvat, until its marionette doesn't want to be controlled anymore. Which would give us, like an actual playable model of the little female, but then it would also kind of like absolve her of any possible Fatui crimes in the way that Hoyo kind of likes to do. So that's, yeah. Anyway, is it absolute crack? Of course it is. It's extreme crack, even for me, but that's kind of what makes it fun. And I'm also kind of like trying to cope my way into having Cendrone appear in Fontaine, because it would be so cool for them to like pull off a quiet takeover of all the mechanical robots wandering around the city as a distraction for Arlecchino's sting operation. And I only have a few more weeks to sit with this idea, so just let me have this for now. Anyway, that's all from me, guys. Thanks again to all my members for supporting this channel, and thanks to you for watching. Take care, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.